have it. Programme motion, Minister to move.
I beg to move.
The question is the Finance Number 2 Bill Programme Number 2 motion as on the order paper.
Aye.
So I haven't quite put the question. I'm just checking if anyone wishes to speak. Kirsty Blackman?
Can I just check which bit we're on there, because I wasn't entirely there. This is in relation to the programme motion for the timing for today, which is around the 3 hours for today, in which case, Madam Deputy Speaker, I am happy for there to be 3 hours today.
Thank you. Thank you. Do I have any responses? No, we will proceed. The question is the Finance Number 2 Bill Programme Number 2 motion as on the order paper. As mayors that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Finance Number 2 Bill to be considered.
Now.
No amendments on consideration. Third reading. Now, I call the Minister to move third reading, Mr. Nigel Huddleston.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I beg to move that this bill be read a third time. May I also take the opportunity to thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and the other Madam Deputy Speaker for your professionalism and kindness and robustness in this place. You will be sorely missed. And I'd also like to express my appreciation for all those who've announced that they will be standing down at this election, and thank them for their service in this House. I think I speak for everybody when I say there is no doubt anybody who comes into this place does so for very positive motivations, because they want to make the world a better place for their children and grandchildren. It may sound trite, but that is a motivation we all share, and we may disagree on the route to achieve that, but anybody who comes into this place does so with incredible professionalism, and we should all thank them for that service. But moving on to the politics of today and policy, Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill helps deliver the Prime Minister and the Government's priorities following the autumn statement and the spring budget. The economy has vastly improved. The economy is growing again, real wages are increasing, and, as we found out this week, inflation is down to its lowest figure in nearly 3 years. The finance bill we are debating today continues to build on this economic improvement through rewarding work, encouraging investment in our economy, and through boosting home ownership. As the two recent fiscal events outlined, we've rewarded work by making national insurance tax cuts. 27 million employees will get an average tax cut of £900 a year, and 2 million self-employed will get a tax cut averaging £700. This is the largest ever cut to employee and self-employed national insurance. And this bill furthers the work done on rewarding work, for example, by increasing the High Incomes Child Benefit Charge, or HITBIC, threshold from £50,000 to £60,000. In addition, the rate of the charge will be halved so that child benefit is not repaid in full until you earn £80,000, taking 170,000 families out of paying this tax charge. And 485,000 families will benefit altogether by an average of £1,260 through these child benefit changes. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
I just want to put in record, if I can, Madam Deputy Speaker, my thanks to the Minister and to Government for that particular issue. It's one that we and our party pursued over a number of years. Government took it on board and they very kindly changed the law in relation to it. So I want to thank the Minister in particular, but thank Government, because that's one of the things that we can pick to our constituents and my constituents in Strangford and say, here's delivery of what you asked for and what we did. Thank you.
Minister?
Yes, well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his always gracious and pertinent intervention. And I thank him and all of those who've campaigned for this, because we do know it will make a real difference to the budgets of many households across the country in what we recognise are still very challenging times. This bill will also drive investment in the economy through various measures, including additional support for our world-leading creative industries. And we're making current tax reliefs for theatres, orchestras and museums and galleries permanent at a rate of 45% for touring theatres and museums, galleries, touring productions, 40% for non-touring productions and 45% for orchestras. And this will ensure that our creative industries have the support they need after the unprecedented economic shock of the pandemic. We will also further support the UK's independent film sector through a new UK independent film tax credit at a rate of 53% for films with lower budgets. And this will support the production of UK independent films and their incubation of UK talent. Our creative sector is vitally important to our national life, and this government is committed to supporting UK businesses in this sector. This is also a bill that will boost transactions in the housing market. And this bill will cut the higher rate of capital gains on residential property from 28% to 24%, encouraging landlords and second homeowners to sell their properties, which would in fact increase revenues because there would be more transactions. And this will make more homes available to purchase for a variety of buyers, including, of course, first-time buyers. But we also need to ensure that the property system is fit for purpose. And this government is clear. Where policies are not meeting their objectives, we will take clear and decisive action. And this is why we are abolishing multiple dwellings relief, or MDR, a bulk purchase relief in the stamp duty land tax regime from the 1st of June 2024. Abolition follows an external evaluation which found no strong evidence that the relief is meeting its original objective of supporting investment in the private rented sector, and HMRC has also recorded many instances of abuse and attempted abuse. We're also amending rules so individuals buying a new lease over a leasehold residential property through a nominee or bare trustee will be able to claim first-time buyers relief on their stamp duty land tax bill. And this change will ensure, for example, victims of domestic abuse are not unfairly penalised if they wish to buy their first homes anonymously. It will ensure those in difficult circumstances are not facing additional barriers to purchasing homes. And this is a bill that will make the tax system fairer by closing tax avoidance loopholes and making relevant changes to VAT. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to thank Honourable and Right Honourable members from across the House for their helpful and insightful contributions to the debates during this bill's quicker than expected passage. I'd also like to thank the many stakeholders who provided their views on the issues raised and provided evidence for Public Bill Committee, and the Treasury and HMRC officials, and of course House clerks and officials who have supported getting this bill to this point so quickly. This bill rewards work, it encourages investment in our economy and boosts home ownership. It's part of the government's clear plan of action, and for these reasons I commend it to the House.
Thank you. The question is that the bill be now read the third time. James Murray.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and may I begin by paying tribute to your years of service and thanking you for your guidance. If I may tell one very brief anecdote, which is actually from a previous finance bill, where I hadn't quite realised it was my duty to move the opposition amendments before the time of voting, and I was distracted by the Honourable Member for Hove in conversation at the time. The chamber was full. I think you cleared your throat 3 times at me until I finally moved it. And on the way out, the Right Honourable Member from Maidenhead said to me, "You'll never forget that, will you?" And it is true, I won't. That was great advice and guidance which will stick with me throughout any future years I may have here, depending on the next election. Thank you very much. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, we're here today to consider the third reading of this finance bill. And we in the opposition hope this will be the last in the line of 14 years' worth of Conservative finance bills. This finance bill comes after 14 years of Conservative failure on the economy and leaves a legacy of higher taxes, falling living standards and stagnant economic growth. The truth is, whatever they say or try to do now, whether in this chamber today or on the campaign trail over the next 6 weeks, it is too late to repair the damage they have done to the economy and to people's standard of living. Now, of course, I don't think any of us were expecting to be completing the remaining stages of the finance bill in the rushed end of this Parliament. Many of us had assumed the Prime Minister would call the election later in the year, and I still have not heard why he ultimately decided to call it for July. I have one theory, though, which is that the Prime Minister realised that prolonging the general election date would raise the prospect of there being another finance bill in which the government may have had to legislate to end the non-dom tax status. Because let's face it, the Prime Minister really does not want to get rid of the non-dom tax status. Maybe he thought this was a way to avoid the Conservatives having to keep their promise to end it. I'm afraid, though, he may still be disappointed, as if Labour wins the next general election, we will end the non-dom tax status and the new loopholes the Conservatives have been planning once and for all. Of course, now we are to have a general election, perhaps the Conservatives will also finally tell us how they will pay for their £46 billion unfunded spending commitment to abolish national insurance altogether. But given that track record, though, I will not be holding my breath. Now, during the consideration of this bill, we have tried to amend it to force the government to come clean about the impact the 6-year freezing of the income tax personal allowance and the higher rate threshold is having on taxpayers across the country. We have also tried to force the Chancellor to set out what impact his and his predecessors' policies are having on pensioners, and how more of them will pay tax and more of them will have higher tax bills as a result of decisions by the Conservatives. And alongside the impact on individual taxpayers, we have tried to amend the bill to encourage the government to follow our plan to bring back certainty for businesses by capping the rate of corporation tax at 25% for the whole of the next Parliament. And finally, we sought to give certainty to the oil and gas industry by being clear that our strengthened windfall tax or energy profits levy would end no later than the end of the next Parliament. We were disappointed, though sadly not surprised, that none of our amendments became part of the bill. Madam Deputy Speaker, we will not be opposing this third reading today, but let me close by saying two things. First, I would like to pay my thanks to the clerks and the House of Commons staff for all their support throughout the bill's progress, and to outside organisations, including particularly the Chartered Institute of Taxation, for all their help, not just with this finance bill, but with all 6 finance bills that I have been the Shadow Minister responsible for. May I also put on record my appreciation of the way in which the honourable members for Mid-Worcestershire and Grantham and Stamford in particular have drawn a line between the tough and sometimes barbed exchanges here in the Chamber and their courtesy and respectfulness outside of the Chamber. This is not always the case in politics, but when it happens, I believe it makes the House of Commons a better place, whilst not for a second compromising on the sharpness of the political questions we are here to rightly contest. But ultimately, we are all here to do what is best for our country, and I do not believe that 5 more years of the Conservatives would serve that goal. Not only have they become defined by chaos and division, not only do they end up putting party before country at every turn, but it is also clear that as a party, they have done too much damage to the economy, they have too much squeeze to living standards, and they have too much to stretch public services to breaking point. I hope this is the last in a 14-year line of Conservative finance bills, because the country needs change. Finally, we have the chance to ask the British people what government they want for the next 5 years, and I hope they will put their trust in our changed Labour Party to change our country for the better.
Peter Aldous.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And if I could just start by paying tribute to yourself. The best type of umpire or referee is someone who is formidable, but fair and also greatly respected. And you tick all 3 of those. I'm most grateful to you for calling me to speak. I do so as I have some concerns about the unintended consequences arising from the Clause 7, which is the abolition of multiple dwellings relief for stamp duty land tax. My honourable friend, the Minister, has already set out some issue with the reasons for abolishing it. I just wish to go a little bit further and perhaps pry a little bit more response out of him to seek to allay these concerns I do have. Now, I make these observations as a former charter surveyor, as the MP for a constituency that might possibly be adversely affected, and having received representations from the British Property Federation. I'm also aware that a number of pension funds, investors, builders and professional advisers have written to my right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, expressing their concerns. Madam Deputy Speaker, by way of background, the build-to-rent sector arose from the combination of the introduction of stamp duty, land tax, multiple dwellings relief in 2011, and also the implementation of some of the recommendations of the Montague Review in 2012. Subsequently, it has been, I believe, extremely successful. £40 billion has been invested in the build-to-rent sector. This has resulted in 100,300 additional homes being completed, with a further 166,000 in the planning and delivery pipeline. Whilst the sector still represents a relatively small proportion of the delivery of new homes, it is growing rapidly, with the number of completed build-to-rent homes increasing by 17% year-on-year in Q4 of last year, 2023. Investors and developers initially focused on London, then the larger cities such as Manchester, Birmingham and Leeds, and now their interest is rippling right out across the UK. Build-to-rent, in effect, acts as an anchor in large development schemes. It helps gets homes of other tenures built, and multiple dwellings relief enables much-needed homes to be built outside London and the South East, in areas where there are lower property values and where otherwise development would not be financially viable. Madam Deputy Speaker, my concern is that the abolition of multiple dwellings relief in the form that it is proposed could have a variety of unintended consequences. And I'll briefly go through this. Firstly, as I know from my own inbox and from my own postbag, and which I would anticipate is the case for all colleagues, we need to be building more homes to rent. This provision potentially removes one of the ways of doing this. Secondly, it will have an impact on what I would term specialist sectors. I have in mind student accommodation and also sheltered housing, where, responding to demand, developers are increasingly looking to provide units to let. Thirdly, the relief is most needed in those areas where the property market is weaker, that is outside London and the South East. This is quite often in those areas where the need for housing is more housing is most acute. Fourthly, we have a problem in the UK of there being too few house builders. The small and medium-sized house builder is an increasingly endangered species. What this clause could do is potentially undermine an alternative means of housing delivery. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, I am mindful of the enormous task of urban regeneration and town centre renewal that we face right across the UK. In other words, what has been the theme of much of this Parliament, levelling up. This task is enormous and it is incredibly expensive. It is neither practical nor possible for the state to do this heavy lifting on its own. There is a need to leverage in private finance from pension funds and from investors. Multiple dwellings relief is a means of doing this. Some might say a small way, but its abolition potentially sends a negative message that there is no place for the public and private sectors to work together. Madam Deputy Speaker, can I suggest that we could amend this to involve and retain the multiple dwellings relief for transactions, say, of 6 or more dwellings, on the basis that this would underpin the development appraisals of large rented housing schemes and will result in significantly more rental homes being built than if the relief is completely abolished. This threshold of 6 mirrors the existing rule that purchases of 6 or more dwellings can be treated as a commercial property transaction for stamp duty land tax purposes, and is also at a level at which multiple dwellings relief is hard to abuse. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would be most grateful if my honourable friend, the Financial Secretary to the Treasury, who I think has been incredibly patient in listening to my various concerns about this finance bill during its course, if he could just comment a little bit more and seek to allay these concerns, which are genuinely held. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Kirsty Blackman.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I very much like the comments that somebody made earlier about you being a good example to women in this place and somebody that people look up to, and I did really agree with those, so I just wanted to say thank you on that part before I begin my speech. I wanted to talk about generally finance bills in washing up, but also specifically this finance bill in washing up. It feels like over my time in Parliament, I have spent a lot of time dealing with finance bills. I've also spent far too much time dealing with finance bills during the course of washing up. I don't know if anybody remembers the finance bill in 2017, but because of the way that the election was called that year, the finance bill had to go through a washing up process. It was massively gutted in advance of going through that washing up process. Now, the problem that I had is that I had gone through and written amendments for all of the clauses that were now being taken out of that finance bill. So I was somewhat unhappy about the fact that I'd done a significant amount of work that was never going to see the light of day as a result of the process. So on that occasion, I gave what I think was an over 50-minute long speech, because I spoke about every amendment that I had written. Now, I'd like to reassure the House that I will not be doing the same thing today. I have not written amendments for this bill, and nor has my colleague. In fact, I have come in at the last moment to take over because, sadly, he was already back in Inverness before the Prime Minister made the announcement of the election, and there was no physical way for him to get back here today in time. So I do appreciate the hard work that he has done in the committee stage, for example, and in the previous stages in this House, and he's sorry he cannot be there today, and I'm unfortunately a poor substitute, but I'll do my best. We will, Madam Deputy Speaker, be voting against this at the third reading. I'm sure that nobody will be surprised, given that we put in a reasoned amendment at the second reading. This is consistent with the approach that we have had throughout the progress of this bill. Just on the basis of the progress of how finance bills go through the House and of specifically this finance bill and recent finance bills, there has been an ongoing issue with government ministers refusing and chancellors refusing to include the amendment of the law resolutions when it comes to finance bills. The budget resolutions for amendment of the law is a genuine constitutional change, refusing to have that in place. And it was put in place without much of a fanfare that these amendment of the law resolutions would be taken away, pretty much on the basis that they did it in that wash-up in 2017, or they did it in one of the finance bills that was brought through in a very tight timescale, and then it was never brought back. The amendment of the law resolution is something that is really important for finance bills. It's important for scrutiny. I would very much hope that the official opposition would commit to, should they get back in, should they become a government at some point in the future, would commit to bringing back amendment of the law resolutions for budget resolutions when it comes to finance bills. My other concern about scrutiny of finance bills is the fact that the finance bill continues not to take oral evidence. The Procedure Committee will be sick of hearing me, because I talk about this in almost every Procedure Committee meeting, say that the lack of oral evidence that there is on finance bills means that the scrutiny is not as good as it could be. And I appreciate that the Minister mentioned those people who do put in written evidence for finance bills, but I do not think it is a substitute. I understand the concerns that ministers have about the fact that we have Committee of the Whole House and then we have the sessions in Public Bill Committee following that. But the thing is that mostly the stuff, or often the stuff that is considered in the Public Bill Committee, is incredibly technical, and it would really benefit from members being able to ask those questions of external organisations who have got the real experience. The Association of Accounting Technicians, for example, would be able to give us a significant amount of information on how that would work. In bills that I've done that have had oral evidence, members have relied heavily on quoting that oral evidence throughout the progress of the bill. So I do think it would make the finance bill much better and would make the scrutiny of that much better. Specifically around our concerns on this bill, the Chancellor made a number of comments on the radio yesterday and was speaking on Radio 4 yesterday morning in advance of the announcement of the election. And one of the excellent journalists on Radio 4 pushed him to say whether or not he felt that he was better off now than he had been at the beginning. The Chancellor didn't answer that question. He did not say whether or not he felt that he was better off. But the reality, Madam Deputy Speaker, is if we ask our constituents, if we ask people up and down these islands what their biggest concern is at the moment, they overwhelmingly say the cost of living crisis. They are massively concerned about the fact that food prices have gone through the roof, that electricity prices and gas prices have gone through the roof. They are massively concerned about the extra amounts of money that they are having to shell out. Now, this finance bill, this budget that was brought forward, was an opportunity for the UK government to recognise that. It was an opportunity for them to take that seriously. It was an opportunity for them to do what we have done in Scotland, which is to put tackling child poverty front and centre of the decision-making processes. We have got in Scotland the Scottish Child Payment, which has taken 100,000 children out of poverty. We are doing everything that we can to mitigate the policies that this UK government is putting in. But the reality is that all we can do is mitigate. The reality is that with the block grant being the lowest percentage of UK government spending that it has been since devolution, the reality is that with the capital budgets for the Scottish Parliament being slashed, that we are finding it increasingly difficult because we are not in control of all of those levers. We are not in control of all of our finances. We're not in control of setting the minimum wage. We cannot increase the minimum wage to a proper living wage and not a pretendy living wage. We can't scrap the two-child cap. We cannot do these things. We can mitigate as far as we possibly can, but we do not have all of the powers that we require. People in Scotland are better off as a result of the decisions of the Scottish Government. They're getting free university. They are getting the ability to go to the dentist for free. I could not believe the low percentage of NHS dentists that there are in the rest of the UK. They are getting the opportunity to have the Scottish Child Payment. They're getting a higher number of children from deprived areas going to university, for example. There is a huge amount of good being done in Scotland, but it's being done by the SNP government who've got one hand tied behind their back by Westminster. Now, the Chancellor's comments or the Chancellor's refusal to say whether or not he was better off shows the difference that there is between the haves and the have-nots throughout these islands. It shows the fact that actually, if you ask a lot of the people that come to receptions here, a lot of the people that have got high salaries, how they're feeling about the cost of living crisis, yeah, it might have taken the edge off a bit, might mean that they can have slightly fewer holidays, it might mean that they have slightly fewer cars than they had previously, but it doesn't mean that they are having to make those decisions about how to spend every penny, every moment of every day. It does not mean that they're lying in bed at night like our constituents are lying in bed at night, worrying about how they're going to manage to pay their rent, about how they're going to manage to pay their electricity prices, about how they're going to manage to buy bread or potatoes or pasta. The inflation figures that were announced yesterday do not show that things are better. They show that inflation is less high than it was. But to somebody who is buying pasta that has gone up 45% in the past few years, does it really make a difference whether that pasta is only going to go up 47% rather than 49% over the past few years? Does it really make a difference when actually they are having a 25% overall increase in the cost of food in the last few years, when benefits have not kept pace, when social security has not kept pace? The UK government had the opportunity in this budget to help with the cost of living crisis, and they did not take it. They may stand up and talk about the changes that they are making in relation to national insurance, the changes that they are making in relation to tax. Those changes impact those people who are working and who are earning above those thresholds. Those changes only impact those people who are in those groups. And actually, a good chunk of people in those groups, particularly those on the lowest earnings, are also getting universal credit and are also seeing the major issues that there are with universal credit, particularly for single people, but also particularly for those people with larger families, because of things like the two-child cap. The reality is that this UK government had an opportunity to make a difference to people's lives, and they refused to take it. They do not have the same priorities as we do. We will always put Scotland first. We will always fight in this place. We will always fight against UK government decisions where the people of Scotland are unhappy with those decisions. Whether it is a UK Tory government or a UK Labour government, we will do everything that we can to ensure that Scotland's voice is heard. We will do everything that we can to disagree with legislation that the people of Scotland disagree with, and we will do everything that we can to work on a cross-party basis where that legislation is in the interests of the people of Scotland. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have made very clear that we disagree with this legislation and that we will be opposing the third reading.
Minister Nigel Huddleston.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank those who have contributed to today's debate and, of course, those who have contributed throughout the progress of this bill. May I turn first to a few of the comments made by the Honourable Member for Aberdeen North. And I do respect the views that she holds about scrutiny of bills in this place. But in particular with the Finance Bill, I hope she does recognise that often Finance Bill contains multiple elements, many clauses, some of which have been developed over a period of many years, been subject to multiple consultations, a huge amount of input, and I do appreciate she did acknowledge there's a lot of written evidence as well that's provided, which is hugely valuable and very much appreciated. And I think by evidence, by the fact that she and her colleagues are pressing to a vote this evening, shows that there is scrutiny and there is hold to account, there's diversity of opinions on these things. I do, however, have to disagree with her on many other comments. In terms of who's better off, 27 million workers are better off because of the national insurance cut. 2 million self-employed are better off. If the Honourable Lady doesn't believe it, I suggest she looks at her payslip. She will see that national insurance is going down, and that does make a meaningful difference. And she may be sniffy about it, but £900 for an average worker is a meaningful difference to many of my constituents and constituents across the country. And for those not in work, of course, we increase benefits as well by 6.7%. We increase pensions by 8.5%. We always make sure all people in society are looked after under the Conservatives. She made other comments then about support for the cost of living and a few other things. I consistently in this House believe that the opposition seem to be under some collective sense of amnesia and have completely forgotten the last 5 years and the global challenges all economies faced by the pandemic, followed by the global cost of living crisis. This government has had to intervene in a way nobody anticipated. That meant taxes have had to be higher. But as soon as we get the opportunity, as soon as we've got the choice to bring them down, that's exactly what we are doing. Because we know how difficult it's been for people, and we want to put more money into people's pockets as soon as we can. That's exactly what we're doing. That's why we've got a plan, and it's working. The Honourable Member for Waveney, whose opinions and views I always respect, and I will never be alarmed or disturbed by his frequent comments to me, and again, holding me to account and indeed government to account for policy decisions. I think I can give him some reassurance, though. The abolition of the multiple dwellings relief is for a very good reasons. It's not working as intended. And of course, a considerable amount of money then is involved in this, and we need to make sure that when we're spending taxpayers' money, or indeed allowing reliefs, that it has the impact that's intended. And therefore, because it wasn't working as intended, and because it was subject to considerable abuse, we are deciding to abolish it. But I can give the honourable gentleman the assurance, particularly in certain areas that he mentioned. For example, large investors, including those in the build-to-rent sector who purchase 6 or more properties in a single transaction, can still continue to benefit from the non-residential rates of stamp duty land tax, and they can be quite beneficial. And we are engaged and in discussions with stakeholders, including some of the bodies he's mentioned, because we do not want there to be unintended consequences, and therefore we do appreciate their input in this bill, as always. But I thank the honourable gentleman for his fantastic interventions, and as always, he's an amazing MP for his constituents, and I always appreciate his comments. Now, coming on to the honourable gentleman opposite, I will thank him first for his gracious comments, and I think he's correct in, as often the case in this House, what's written on Hansard and what the public see, the rather robust debates we sometimes have, is not always a reflection of the generally positive relationship we have on a personal level. It does not mean, though, that we don't have robust disagreement when it comes to policy. And on this, I'm afraid I'm going to have to raise quite a few points today. The honourable gentleman has, I think, every single time I've appeared at the dispatch box, complained about us not calling a general election. And now we've called a general election, he's still complaining. It really is it quite takes the biscuit. And he continued along his rather familiar frame of constantly never missing an opportunity to talk Britain down again. I refer him to the comments I made earlier on about the pandemic and the interventions in the pandemic and the immense cost that was, £400 billion to the UK economy. The interventions we had, not a single one of them, I believe, at the time, did the opposition actually oppose. So it's a bit rich to complain about the impact of that, the obvious impact of that in terms of taxation, and then complain about the actual interventions measures. As I said, if he had an alternative plan, I would have loved to have heard it then, and I'd love to hear it now, but it's non-existent. What he's hoping to do is alarm and disturb and depress the British public into voting Labour. That is not a particularly bright strategy. The British public deserve better than that, and we need to hear confidence and optimism, not pessimism, about the UK economy. I won't repeat the comments I've made on many occasions about the ridiculous scaremongering they have over the national insurance cuts and the particular impact that could have on pensions, because he knows, as I've said many times, it will not have a negative impact on pensions, for the obvious reason that I had hoped he would now understand, is that national insurance does not wholly pay for pensions or welfare or the NHS. So why on earth they're going around the country trying to scaremonger old people and people who rely on the NHS into believing otherwise, I do not know. It is not an admirable way to try and win an election. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, there are several other areas as well. The opposition and the honourable gentleman on many occasions keeps talking about the mantra of the changed Labour Party. Well, you know, maybe in some ways that's true. They've certainly gone from embracing the hard left to embracing the hard right of British politics. That's quite a journey, an unbelievable journey, in fact, a journey that speaks volumes about their values, i.e. that they have none. Or as the old saying goes, if they have them and you don't like them, don't worry, they have others. And on policy areas as well, the constant string of flip-flops and U-turns and uncertainty, which I'm sure we will see during this general election as well, is something that we will now be holding them to account for. In terms of, for example, their abolition of the £28 billion green spending commitment, well, they've abolished the spending commitment, but still seem to have retained the policy. Were they abolishing tuition fees or maybe not? Are they going to abolish the House of Lords? Maybe not. Are they going to return to free movement and the single market? Or maybe not. Are they going to abolish universal credit? Maybe not. Are they increasing income tax on top earners? Maybe not. Rent caps, ULEZ, bankers' bonuses, 0 hours. We've had constant flip-flops from the opposition, so not even they know what their actual policy is. It completely lacks any credibility. And as I said, I do not think they can expect the British public to be taken for such a ride. Whereas, with the Conservatives, the British public know where they stand because we've got a plan. They can see it in the recent autumn statement and the spring budget, and in this bill, Madam Deputy Speaker. No matter what stage of life you are in, you can be confident that the Conservatives are there to support you. With our childcare measures and the child benefit changes in this bill, it is clear that when you bring children into this world, we are there for you. Through our national insurance cuts and our measures to support businesses, when you're in work or running a business, we are there for you. And if you have finished work and are now retired, through the triple lock and other measures, we have shown that we are always there for you as well. And Madam Deputy Speaker, we can only have strong public services and a strong welfare system that helps the most vulnerable in society if we also have a strong economy to generate the taxes to pay for it. So a strong recovery is vital for both the public and the private sector. And on this side of the House, that means that we are unapologetically pro-business. And despite the challenges of the last few years, we are now on a clear path to recovery. The economy is growing again, inflation is falling, real wages are increasing, and if you look at your pay packet, you will see that your national insurance taxes have been cut too. That's more money in people's pockets because of the actions and decisions of this government. Because we have a plan, the opposition do not have a plan. We cannot put this at risk. So stick with the Conservatives for a brighter future, and I commend this bill to the House.
The question is that the bill be now read the third time. As many as that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. Aye. Division. Clear the lobby. Order. The question is that the bill be now read the third time. As mayors that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. Tellers for the ayes, Mark Jenkinson and Joy Morrissey. Tellers for the noes, Kirsten Oswald and Patrick Grady. Order. Order.
The ayes to the right, 215. The noes to the left, 19.
The ayes to the right, 215. The noes to the left, 19. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock.
Is that it?
Just before I suspend the House pending the arrival of Lord's messages, may I just take a moment to thank everyone for being so kind to me this afternoon and for their good wishes. It hadn't occurred to me that when I put out a tweet, or whatever it's now called, just before 1 o'clock, that when I came in here to the chamber by 1:30, that people would have actually read it. That was a real surprise to me. It would appear that the power of social media is great, and I really ought to use it more. I've been very touched by the kind comments, and it does show that we all make friends on all sides, every corner of this house. And that's because we all have something in common, because we are not the people who sit at home moaning and shouting at the television. We are the people who get up and do something about it. And everyone who sits in this house has come here with the object of making the world a better place. We have different ways of doing it, but we all have that one objective. As I mentioned earlier, to me, being chairman of Ways and Means is the best job in the world by far, and I've been very privileged to be allowed to do it. When I was a little girl studying Oscar Wilde, The Importance of Being Earnest at school, it was my ambition to play Lady Bracknell. And since I first climbed the steps to this chair 10.5 years ago, I've had the great pleasure of playing Lady Bracknell every day. Order! Order!